All right. Like I said, it's a conversation about education. Many things happening, balls in the air all over the place. And we're going to ask ourselves some questions. And to help us with that conversation this morning is Janet Ouko, who is an education expert. Janet, good morning.
Good morning to you.
Welcome to the Situation Room.
Many thanks.
You are in the hot seat.
Mm-hmm.
It's a hot topic. Education in the country today, and we want to look at some of those matters, where you come from a position of having been in government and dealt with some of these matters, and now looking at what should be done, or what do these situations tell us about a situation. We've said in this room that education in this country is in a crisis.
It is.
Okay, well, off the bat, that's where we are, and we'll have that conversation. But let's welcome you properly. Mm-hmm. I've told you can run, with Standard Chartered and a marathon. I've told you can have a cup of tea with us. CT has a proverb. We welcome everybody with a proverb every morning, and he has proverbs from a country that you may know.
Bring it on.
It's on the East African coast.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let me not go around in circles. The country is called Kenya. The proverbs for this week, given that they come from the country that we are in,
mm-hmm.
we have not indicated specifically which part of the country they come from.
Okay.
We're asking our listeners and our guests in the show to determine whether they can resonate with it,
okay,
and whether they can figure out where this proverb comes from, just on their own. And
okay.
if maybe the communities they come from
okay.
have proverbs that are similar to this one.
Okay.
Okay? How easy it is to defeat people who don't kindle the fire for themselves.
Okay.
What do you make of it?
What do you make of it?
How easy is it to defeat people that do not kindle fire for themselves?
Yes.
Yeah. So that I would want to look at it from the perspective of what the issue that we are discussing now is that we are not able to arrest little situations, and when they spill out of hand, the repercussions are meant for people that have been lied to, that a lot of these things are happening because of you, we want to save you, and so on and so forth. Yeah, that's how I make of it.
See, the beauty of Proverbs is that when you are asked your opinion,
everyone is right.
Thank
there you go.
That is precisely it, because it is your opinion.
How dare anybody tell you your opinion is wrong?
Exactly, as if they know what your opinion actually is to you.
Ought to have been.
Yes.
Janet, karibu sana once again.
Thank you.
You served, obviously, capacity of education at the county level previously. And you were very robust in some of the things that you had to say and some of the implementation that you wanted to bring about. In the last 1 year, we've seen quite a number of things in an opinion that has been, shared greatly in this room that would then contribute to the notion that education in Kenya is, at crisis levels in terms of the implementation of certain policies to have things done. When the new administration came into place, President William Ruto instituted the Presidential Working Party on Education Reforms to try and get some things working. Before that, we had seen the implementation of new curriculum, and there were, of course, teething problems. Many would argue that these teeth have not grown yet and the problems are still teething, right? But here we are today, where now we've seen more introductions. We've talked about a new grading for KCSE. We've said that you can get into university then still with a solid grade because of subjects that you have chosen. Give us an overall of what your feeling is as somebody who's obviously well versed in education matters, as an expert in your own right. What do you feel is the overarching feeling of what is happening with education in Kenya today before we get into the nitty-gritty?
Thank you very much. And one of the things I like saying is that I like giving my perspective. I know the most spoken about feature about myself is having served at the county.
Yes.
But it's also imperative to know that I have served also as a board member of the Global Partnership for Education for 2 years, and I was representing the developing country civil society organizations. I have served in the Africa Early Childhood Network. I've served in the Africa Network Campaign on Education for All. So just to sort of say that when I look at education, I do not just look at it from a very short-term perspective. That's what I would want to say, that is what is happening around us, that we only look at the very short term, because the tragedy is that we have developed a situation where we want to listen to the masses, and then we say, what do they want? And then we do that. And then we cannot do that about sensitive sectors such as education and health. You actually need to look at it from a global perspective. Where are we moving towards? And I would say that a lot of the things that happened, and especially what was a lot more talked about before the current government came into place, it's only taking time to prove that a lot of that was sort of just speaking to the political side of it, because you remember this presidential working party, it replaced another task force that was in place. And one of the biggest criticisms that they went around this country saying is that Parliament was not consulted. But what do? They come in, they do a replica, they do a task force, which is a replica of what was there. It comes up with some recommendations. Shying away, I would want to give you the task force report of the previous curriculum reforms, task force report.
Yes.
And then you look at the report of the Presidential Working Party. I will dare you to identify any differences, technical differences at least. But what you can pull out are political differences that all these reforms were pushing so hard for the TSC to be a certain way. And then there were complaints from teachers. So what do we do as Kenya Kwanza government? For us to be seen as if we are reformists, we are going to do that which pleases the masses. But what happens to us in the long haul, And then we went around this country. What does going around this country means? So that you're soliciting for views. You want to convince us that going around this country means putting 1,000 people in a hall to talk about a technical issue. From where I sit, and especially as an expert, clearly you cannot pick anything technical. Tell me that you're going there to popularize, but you cannot pick anything from a hall of 3,000 people and expect that you are really going to discuss curriculum from there. And I say that sometimes it is good to be seen as if you are addressing the concerns of the masses. But I know from where I sit, and especially as a leader, there are some decisions that must be made that are unpopular, because you cannot tell me now everything I know about education and where we want to go. Because this which has happened now, and especially let's talk about what Kenyans can relate to, that we have now said that instead of taking the entire 5 subjects to determine, you aggregate grade at KCSE level, we are now just going to pick 2. What does that do? It creates a pseudo feeling like yes, because those learners that are now going to sit for the exams, people will go around this country saying that, look, we have made more people enter the university.
Yes.
But from where I sit and from where you sit, you know that university is not free. Nobody should be lied to that children in this country are not accessing universities because they have not made it. They have not made the grade.
Janet, what
children are not accessing university because university is so expensive. We have just seen fee structures of universities being flashed here. It's 350,000. And the least that you can do even for the social sciences courses is I've seen it's about 270,000 Kenya shillings. We know very well it is very populist of a government to say that we are going to fund university education 100%. It is even globally, it is not accepted because we have not even finished funding basic education for us now to extend to tertiary education and pretend that we can actually be able to fund a university education fully. And the conversation is about how have we enabled sciences to be popular? You cannot make recommendations based on people are not performing well in sciences and therefore they're not able to make it to the universities. But how can they make it in sciences when there are no laboratories in our schools? How? You didn't even give that child opportunities to even explore whether they are good in sciences or they are not, because they do not have teachers, they do not have facilities. So how then do you tell them that instead of struggling so much with sciences and physics, You can actually do CRE, you can actually do history, and when you get A's in those, then you can qualify that it's a lie in the long run. And we are shortchanging our children, and we really need to look at each other and say, what for? What are we thinking? What are we thinking about our country? For how long can propaganda, for how long can PR go? I mean, how long can it take us? Do you want to tell us that those people that sat down and thought about these sciences and thought about, I know that there's a conversation I like about this whole grading thing. Mm-hmm. I like the conversation that there are children that are not gifted very well in physics and chemistry. Even if you'd give them the entire facilities, maybe they wouldn't make it.
But there's a place where they are strong.
Yes, there are places where they're strong. For that purpose of the conversation, I agree that we do not need to subject everybody to that kind of grading. But I wouldn't want us to lose the bigger picture, that now government is just likely to just relax and say, because there's no that pressure. Anyway, if you don't have a science lab, I mean, you can read CRE, you can read history. In any case, you will go to the university anyway. And for me, I think that is the biggest conversation, because after all is said and done, it is nobody's business to fund education. It remains the state business. There are conversations here and there saying the way parents should take part in it, the way parents say, yes, they could take part in it. But remember, I did not write the Constitution. We wrote our Constitution that gives every child a right to free and compulsory basic education. And basic education, for all intents and purposes, means 0 to 18 years. So as long as that child is within the basic education framework, they are entitled to free and compulsory education. Let us not make political decisions to just cover for the inefficiencies of our government. And then imagine a child that is somewhere in the village that really has a dream about being a scientist. Mm-hmm. And then they go to some secondary school there, godforsaken, doesn't have a laboratory. They only see it when it is time for mocks, when they're now hired, some apparatus and some reagents are hired. Mm-hmm. So what are we doing about the dream, of that child? And it is true, and I would want somebody from government to confirm for me this, that even in the big public secondary schools, government is not sending money that is supposed to equip the laboratories. For those schools that even have laboratories, money for buying reagents is not coming. For last term, the only funding that went to public schools is 30%.
Indeed,
it's 30%. So really, it's about government running away, and we will come back to still this lie that when government cannot fully commit to something, they look for a shortcut out of it. And that is the same shortcut they have found in funding higher education, where now government runs away from funding higher education and throws the entire burden to the parents, and only take conveniently a very small percentage. They call them the needy. And we do not care to find out the accountability about identifying that needy. But we have identified that needy. And today, even a primary school teacher who takes home a net of about, give or take, 40,000 is not classified as a needy person, and they're expected to fund 370,000 in fees for their university child. That is where we are.
These issues bleed into each other, and then it forms a whole when we talk about education as a whole. But there are very many issues. So let's look at some of them under a magnifying glass, which you've brought out today. One of the issues is the reforms having been suggested, I believe it's 14, 15 points now by the Presidential Working Party, about things that are supposed to happen across board. And this is from pre-primary school all the way to university education. And there are many issues that come in here, funding, grading, etc., etc. What are you saying here? That the needs truly of education, of the stakeholders, the most important stakeholders in my opinion being the learners, and the other stakeholders, parents, teachers, etc., going to the ministry level, that the needs of the stakeholders have actually not been taken into consideration because a government which is instituting these policies is being populist? Is that what you're saying?
Sure. Because we do not have a need such as not knowing what needs to be done in education in Kenya. For the records, we have over 13 reports unimplemented for working parties. They call them presidential working parties, call them task forces, call them jopokazi. We baptize them everything. So we are not where we are supposed to be for not knowing where we should be. But we are not where we should be in the education sector for lack of government commitment to genuinely fund education. When you listen to the current government walking around saying that we have increased funding, and I ask, where have you increased this funding? Can you show me? Like, I'm a 2-year-old. Show me where. Because from where I sit, what a child receives in terms of capitation has not increased by a cent. So when you increase it, I mean, where is this money? You know, we really, I'm really offended by leaders just throwing statements because citizens have no fora to clarify or to ask what exactly. You told us that you have increased funding for this and this, but the capitation grant has remained the same. A child in any public primary school in this country is receiving 1,248 shillings, which never comes on time and which never comes fully. Like, for example, for the last year that we are talking about, the schools have received barely 80%. Nobody gives an accountability of the balance of last year of 20%.
What is going to happen?
What is going to happen to it? Because we have now moved to a brand new year. Where is that 20%? Why didn't you send it? How did you expect us to manage? Because we have vote heads that depend on that capitation grant. So then you have someone walking around the country saying the way they have increased funding for what? For where? Where is the money?
1,200 capitation, is it per term, per year?
Per year. That's an amount that goes per year.
And what is it intended for? What are you supposed to do with this 1,200?
The 1,248 thereabouts. The teachers are served with vote heads that are generated from the Ministry of Education. It should pay for electricity. You should know that for every child, the government sends 6 shillings per year to pay for electricity and water. It's as scandalous as it looks. So there are vote heads for teaching and learning materials and so on and so to just cater all the way to 1,200.
So everything in essence that the student would need is catered for by this 1,200
per term.
As if
per year.
Per year.
As if it is not enough. The ministry still does not send the entire 1,200. It withholds. No, it first withholds some for activities and so on and so forth, so that the money that hits the school, it's give or take 1,000 and something. That's the money that the teacher expects. The money does not come at once. It is divided into 3 tranches.
Yes.
And so that's where
That is why every time school is starting, the teachers are saying, we are waiting for capitation.
Yes.
And then the ministry says, by next week, Tuesday, we will have sent you money. And then even when it is sent, it is not even the whole remaining of the...
Okay. And there is no explanation. My problem is, you may not have all of it, but can you just do an explanation? Because this is our money. You know, we have a very bad culture of non-accountability. When you send little money, what do you expect that teacher to do? You don't even accompany it with saying, we are going to send it in 2 weeks. We are sort of running this country carelessly.
But is this something new? Is this what you're saying is happening now? Is it the first time it has happened in our history, or has it happened before?
It has been happening that the ministry has not been sending money in good time.
Yes.
Why we are raising it and flagging it very vigorously now is to counter a narrative that is a lie, that the government has increased funding to education. We want to be shown where. You know, where is this money? You know, so that we just can't be on lies. We just can't be on propaganda. And there are sectors that I love so much, because you cannot run education on a lie. It will boomerang on you. When you drive down, like when I was coming, I would tell you, like the last week, every junior secondary school in Nairobi sent the children home. Why? Because there is no money.
There is no money.
There is no money. So as you're busy telling us that you have increased money to education, I mean, life does not lie. Children are on the road. Why are they on the road?
Let me ask this question, since we are on capitation. How much then is given for secondary schools?
22,000 and some hundreds.
Yes.
Which is even...
Is that boarding or day?
Day. Every child.
Secondary school,
every child.
Whether you're in a day school, whether in a boarding school, is 22,000.
22,000
per year.
Yeah, the thinking of government, which I have always agreed with, because in my view, all of us should work towards having day school, you know, at the end of the day, because it is cheaper on the parents, because it is not necessary to say that there is any child that needs to sleep in school for them to learn. I mean, learning ends at about 5. So please go home, so it will help us really sort out so many issues, because the current teacher is so much preoccupied with non-teaching roles, like maintaining 1,000 children in the dorm, and we are now even having bed bugs. We are now having, there's just so many non-learning issues that have now become the core issues that we are discussing in our sector. But if we just taught and allowed every child to go and stay with your parents, we would save ourselves a lot of resources, because when government sends 22,000 to every school, to every child for the day school, now you can see the difference, because the fee structures flying around will tell you that secondary school costs, like if you're taking a child to Alliance, per term, you will part with give or take 40,000 per term. So the difference really goes towards sleeping, you in the weekend around. So that cost is just too much for parents. And when government said that for day scholars, every child that is enrolled in a public secondary school, government sends in 22,000 and some hundreds. And it follows the same trend that we have discussed with the primary school capitation grant, that it doesn't come on time. A lot of it is withheld at the ministry level. I mean, at the end of the year, you will see that government withheld 20% of that amount, with no explanation as to why they withheld, with no explanation as to where the money went to or when it will be sent, with no conversation.
I have to ask Janet, because we're going to go to a break in a minute, but when asked, if ever asked, where is the answer in terms of where the rest of this money goes? Because we do know that, like, for example, October 25th, 26th, the year is over.
Sure.
Right? And the chances of this remaining money coming to schools is very slim.
Yeah.
So if and when asked, where do they say this money goes? Because come January, we'll be back to the same cycle again in terms of teachers and heads saying we are waiting for capitation to start the term in January.
That conversation never happens, because who will ask? The head teachers, of course, cannot ask their bosses that question.
You see, when you talk about there having been 13 reports on education, and there have been really, we have changed from the time of independence. We've changed our education system in very many ways, very many times. Most people don't even know that there was an exam that people had in Standard 4, then there was one in Standard 7, then there was one in Form 2 called Kenya Junior, before you actually went to Form 4, then there was one in Form 6, okay? Then the 844 system came in, and the Form 6 aspect of the study went out. Now we have the CBC. On paper, our educational plans usually tend to read very well, and they are very promising. And you figure if this thing were to be operationalized, what a wonderful thing it would be, and what beautiful learning opportunities the students would have. What exactly, now since we're in the current and we are grappling with this CBC, what exactly is the CBC supposed to achieve? In your opinion, of course.
Yeah, and I want to begin from where you left, that there are several reforms that have been made, and all that experts really sat down and had very good thoughts about it and put on paper. You read them and you think, wow, yeah, this is where we should take the education sector, and this is what we really want for our children. But our problem has always been money. I've said that we really don't have problems with where we should go. We have so many ideas, but our problem is money. And if you think about even the 844, it was a very good idea, and all these ideas you see coming from CBC, a lot of them are in bits and pieces from the previous administrations and from the previous curriculums that we have had. But even in 844, we moved with implement before we fully funded. That's why you had art and craft, and no school had a workshop. No school had a hammer or nails. And the teacher is supposed to show you how to make a stool. So what happened? We would buy stools. My father bought for me a stool to take for examination because he does also not know how to make it, and I'm here struggling with it, and there's a carpenter there who is selling it at 150 shillings. So, and even the teacher that we are taking this tool to really does not have the know-how, because they were not even trained. They were not. So that is the problem. And even in CBC, why I really thought that this administration, when they went around criticizing CBC and AA and AA, I thought that when they came in,
they would scrap it.
They will scrap it. That's what everybody expected. But they did not scrap it. Meaning what? Meaning, deep down, and I told people that when the current president was assistant minister for higher education, either assistant minister or something like that.
There was a time he was an assistant minister.
Was assistant minister.
Yes, he was.
I remember vividly during the time when the Vision 2030 was being written. And there were so many conversations about Vision 2030. I remember I was a CEO of an NGO that actually funded a breakfast meeting where he himself opened, and part of that was the reforms, the curriculum reforms. And I remember vividly him saying that we really need to reform. So deep down, even when I saw him moving around this country, I knew this guy deep down knows that we actually need to reform our curriculum. So when he came in, and he's now president, and technically everything about CBC is okay. The only thing that is not okay about CBC is the way we have funded our education system. And that is why, unashamedly, they maintained CBC, but still continued on the path. I say unashamedly because there is no apology that has been done. Remember all the harm that was done in terms of saying this is a bad curriculum. What do you think that did to the parents that had children that don't have an option? You know, there's a section of Kenyans that are so much unmoved by what is happening in CBC because they can take their children to international schools. But there are people in this country that don't have a choice.
Right.
They just have to take their children there. And you're here telling them that it is bad. It is you demonize. And then you don't come back and tell them, no. This is, it's a good system. That is the accountability that I am talking about. And I'm saying CBC is very good because, and I see this move, to sort of reform the grading of KCSE is going towards saying and recognizing that all children are gifted differently.
Sure.
You cannot expect the children that are not gifted in their cognitive ability to succeed in an examination that only relies on cognitive testing. You really cannot do that. And so, for me, if CBC is funded, and I underline the word if CBC is funded, it's a great move that will take the children of this country to a different whole level. You see, even when the Constitution says that right now, I think everybody needs a degree to either vie to be governor.
Yes, or whatever. Yeah.
Or whatever. So think about a child that for them to pass through our system and to be graduate, they have to pass chemistry, they have to pass maths, and clearly they cannot. So what exactly are you telling those people? So for me, CBC opens doors for every learner by exploiting every learner's potential. But I have to put a caveat that if we do not fund education to the level that it should be funded, then we will still be back, and in 2-3 years we will be saying we need to reform, and even if we reformed 1,000 times and we do not fund education the way it is supposed to be funded, someone says that we spend so much on education. Fair enough, we do spend so much on education, but in terms of saying that we have met the international threshold that says that we should spend 24% of our national budget towards education, but are those our needs? What are we actually saying that? Because I see so many other projects. I want to give you one example. I want to give you one example of what is happening, for example, in Nairobi. When we come in and say that we have me as a person, as a politician, I have a pet project.
Yes.
And that pet project takes more budget of the county, for example, than any other project that has been there. We really have to remain within discipline levels, because when you come in as a governor, that is not your money. That is not your money. And we must insist on discipline. Can you spend on functions? Can you spend money on functions? And for example, if you think that Nairobi County is going to be spending 1.7 billion shillings on school feeding program, notwithstanding that particular county of Nairobi has been given a very small function in the education sector called early childhood education, ECD. If you think that Nairobi County government is only holding 11.2% of children of ECD going age, because that is the only capacity that government schools have, and then you don't want to think that your role should even be to expanding this to 100%. You abandon that completely and you say, I have a personal project that I want to do. I want to feed children. Which children are you feeding? Children who are in non-formal schools. What are you saying about them? Do you even stop to think that every parent is a taxpayer? That Mama Mboga who is cutting sukuma wiki there, your kanjos were there and they collected money from her, and then you're telling her that you want to feed children who are already in public schools, which are 196 only in this Nairobi County. You cannot even think that your role is to expand from 196 to something like 200 so that you can bring more children on board. We are joking as a country, and we need to really call out our leaders without these emotions of saying our serikali yetu, serikali yetu. Can we stop all that?
On average, how many students are there in these classes that we're talking about in these public schools, say in Nairobi?
And I know these are facts. School by school,
yes,
it is varying, but the average, and especially if you go to schools in the eastern region, it is a different picture when you talk about the schools in the CBD, because several dynamics have changed, including people moving from those settlements, and now because everything in the CBD has expanded. But if you go to the traditional Eastlands areas, the average class has got 100 children. I know of a school. 100 children in one classroom.
Is that primary or secondary?
Primary school.
100?
There is the Wabu primary school. In fact, all schools in Embakasi West, for example, all public primary schools, 110, 130, 120 in one classroom. Then you come...
Have the classrooms been expanded?
No. You cannot expand a classroom beyond what it is. But what is annoying is the illusion that when we go to the public, we are saying that this feeding program will bring more children to school. To where? To sit where? You're bringing them to sit where? Why can't we have integrity for once? I mean, and when we pass this, and I saw it is very tragic seeing our deputy president abroad saying the way this program in Nairobi will bring more children to school. I felt very unfortunate about the situation. There is no feeding program that will bring any more children to school, and this is why. The teachers don't have space. They don't have space for them. There are so many children of Nairobi that are on waiting lists.
So the fundamental issues that we're looking at here, if we look at certain things, the curriculum, for example,
yes.
One, we are saying that there's nothing wrong with this curriculum, but if you're not going to fund it and build the necessary capacity to have it run, that is where our problem is. And yes, the argument has come out, Janet, that education gets the lion's share of the budget, doesn't it? But then the question keeps coming in that where does the money go? Yes. If you're not going to fund fundamental curriculum development, if you're not going to fund expansion of schools, we keep asking the question here, for example, when is the last time you've seen schools being built in communities?
Never.
Public schools.
We hear of health facilities being
built.
Yes, we hear
right?
of them.
And we're saying that the bulk of the population right now is in school. That's the truth. That the higher percentage of Kenya's population today is of school-going age.
Can I expose to you something tragic? Nairobi County has 85 wards. 85 in total. And wards are the county government administrative unit. There are 10 wards, 10 in this county of Nairobi that do not have one single public primary school. 10 that do not have one public primary school. That is the seriousness of all this. And when you ask yourself, where are those children going to?
The question I'm thinking of is, as you're talking about, I'm thinking of CDF. A lot of this CDF money tends to go to schools. So that word is in a constituency. So what exactly does that MP do? Do you hear the members of parliament pitching a fit or arguing? Or do you hear county assembly members bringing these issues to the fore and saying, look, my ward has no schools?
You know the tragedy, and I know that members of parliament and CDF has done tremendous growth.
Yes.
And if you want to be honest, the Ministry of Education sort of stopped completely putting up new infrastructure in terms of public schools, and they left conveniently that burden to the members of parliament. But the accountability
or to private investors.
Or to private investors,
yes.
Which is really tragic because that amounts to privatization of education. And when it comes to the members of parliament, where do they account, to us? When we are holding people to account, we are not holding members of parliament to account for not developing new schools, because it is not them that are custodians of data. And even when we are holding our government to account, we do not consider indicators like, for example, how many more children have you brought back to the publicly funded education? That is never our conversation. We are dwelling on tokenism. Tokenism. I gave checks of 3,000 shillings in bursaries. It's not okay. It's really not okay, and we cannot. And I said this, that as Nairobians, we one day made a decision to elect a governor. And I saw, because I served in that administration, their entire understanding of health and how health should be run in this country is going to China, bringing containers of diapers and plastic karais, packing it at Pumwani, so that every mother that delivers is given a bag of diapers and a plastic karai, and they go home. And they would sing and dance around the lorry. But on their left hand, they are holding a prescription to go and buy drugs, because that hospital does not have drugs. Before you enter, your spouse would be told to come with jik and to come with cotton wool, because it is not there. That is where we have generated into. Look at us cheering that somebody is going to give us food at 5 shillings. You are not even thinking that for you to get admitted to that public primary school, you must part with 10,000 shillings. Why? Because there is no desk. Because there is no this, there is no that. So between 5 shillings, where 1.7 billion shillings went to, and between telling that governor, no, food we can feed ourselves, but can you equip our classrooms? Can you build us another block so that those children that are at home, because they cannot afford these monies that are being asked in this school to support things that government cannot support, can be able to come here? So that those children that are attending non-formal schools and their parents are working so hard to get the fees in the midst of this. Why aren't we having these conversations? Because we have cheapened ourselves so much, and we have let our country go to people that are making decisions that are for that day. As long as I get clapped for, as long as I get danced for, as long as my name is trending because I did as a tokenist thing, it is not okay. And we cannot make any progress as a country if that is how we want to proceed.
Then can I ask you, are we saying that we don't need school feeding programs?
I have worked in the county government of Nairobi, and I know that you don't do things because people need them. Okay. You do things because you are guided by the CIDP. There's a plan. I have gone through the entire CIDP plan. I have not seen any indication that Kenyans told the government that we are not able to feed our children. So this particular intervention is what we need for now.
Through the avenue of public participation.
Through the avenue of public participation. Through even the processes of county planning, through the CIDP. But everybody said, we do not have enough classes. We do not have enough schools. We do not have enough desks in our schools. We do not have enough teachers.
We do not have labs.
But you know what? Our politicians do not like the hard stuff. They do not like doing the hard stuff. They like the cheap things. Like the example I have given you about buying diapers, and people will go home saying, "Nilipewa diapers," and you ask, for how long are those diapers going to serve you? You know, and really, I know that people, there is a conversation that is there that. For me, I would really want to caution us that it is not that all of us can delegate our thinking. We cannot unknow what we know. And I don't want those people that know the right thing to shy away because you're being told that you are out of touch with Mwananchi. That conversation has to die. That conversation has to die. We must insist on the path of doing things right, whether popular or unpopular. The path for doing things right, we must insist on it.
Let me ask this question again. The reason why I asked about the feeding program is because I know of many day secondary schools, who have feeding programs. Okay? Children come to school. Oh yes, you have something to say.
Yeah, I know. And that's why I'm saying, can we insist on the right way of doing things? I have fought with that feeding program in secondary schools. Because why?
Yes. Why?
If the government says that schooling is free, let us also not take the parental responsibility away from parents and monetize parental responsibility, because that is what has happened. That instead of you carrying food from home, because we are here, and that is what we did. That's what happened to us. We carried food from home and we went with it from school. This obsession with collecting 100 shillings from you so that we can centrally make food so that then we will serve you. I mean, what is it? The idea here is every child having lunch. Can we stop monetizing it? I have met children that have been sent home because they did not have the lunch. They have not contributed to the lunch fund. So it beats the policy of government of free schooling at the end of the day.
What about, I know of let me talk of a school, because I happen to have been the chair of the board of management in the village. There was a feeding program. Parents did not have to contribute to that program. There are places, more so in big cities like Nairobi, where the poverty levels are beyond imagination.
Correct.
So, do I hear you to be saying the feeding program in and of itself is not a bad thing, but the way we've gone about it is what is wrong?
There's no contention that there are families in this city that cannot afford so many things, including what we would consider a decent meal. But they eat. Whatever it is that they eat, they do eat. But I want us to stop emotionalizing things. That if you really emotionalize that a child cannot afford rice and beans, whatever they ate at home, it's a situation. But that particular child can also not afford the 3,000 shillings that are being asked to buy a desk in classroom. So if it were you, what could you afford them? What could you afford them? What we are insisting is, can the government remain in fidelity? The Constitution has given you a responsibility of ensuring free and compulsory basic education to every child. Coming from where? The background was that poverty. Because we did a research in this country, and even globally, levies are the biggest barrier towards children accessing education. It was never food. It has never been food. And I have asked Sakaja, can you show me the data that you're working with to tell you that so many children are out of school in Nairobi because they cannot afford food? For you to put school feeding program as the highest spender of the county budget. Can you imagine? Our health budget is 1.1 billion. Health. And there is nobody else in this world that is going to come and do health for us apart from the county government. But we'll give it 1.1 billion, but you give school feeding 1.7 billion. Are we serious as a nation? Are we serious? Our dispensaries are going to serve 5 million people. 1.7 billion is food for 250,000 children. Are we serious? That is, and that's why I've said, on paper, there is so much money looking like it is going to Wananchi, but it is going to the wrong things. And that is why I'm saying we need to have discipline in the way that we spend. And we need to cut the appetite of politicians for doing the populist things, because we need to know they're doing those populist things with our money and at the expense of other more important things that could have made our lives better.
On a priority list today, because we're coming from the conversation that clearly there's a problem across board, it would be for school feeding program here. We're looking at provision of books. We're looking at capitation. We're looking at hiring of teachers. I mean, look, we could talk about this for days, but let's say that 1.7 billion, let's just use Nairobi as an example. If it was to go somewhere else, what would be on the priority list? Even as our minutes tick down now, what would be on the priority list that would now give education the face that, we have a handle on things?
1.7 billion. Even if you wanted to spend 100 million shillings on putting up a fully fledged learning institution, because now 100 million will not be a school. It will be a learning institution that has got a complex all the way from ECD to primary to secondary school. It can put up 17 institutions. And lo and behold, we have 17 constituencies in Nairobi. So every constituency can have a huge complex where they can commute, and day schooling can be. So what I'm saying is we have all the resources we need to implement the big ideas and the good ideas that we have always had. But what have we done? We have let politicians run away with it, run away with our money to do things for their own political gratification. That for that moment, this is my project. Why is it your project? This is our money. We painstakingly contribute. Have you seen the way Kanjos harass mama mbogas on the street for them to give that 30 shillings? Where do you even get the strength to wave it as my pet project? It is lack of integrity, and we need to call out that for our politicians. It is not your money, it is our money. And you should have the humility to listen to citizens when they tell you, yes, feeding program is a good thing, but we do not think that is the priority that we needed. And even thinking broadly, you saw on the governor's Twitter handle him saying that there's some people caucusing somewhere with the aim of harming our children. And I looked at that tweet and I said, oh God, we can never ever get this low. Are you talking about people thinking about poisoning food for mass production of our children? because you know that citizens don't have a situation where they will ask you, hey, boss, even when you make such a serious allegation, you have no integrity whatsoever to think about that. We do not have a choice, because the schools where we take our children have been given a directive by government that no, we cannot continue with our own small program, because you must, it's sort of, everybody has been bulldozed to it, and you're here making all these allegations about it. We have no choice.
Janet, obviously, like I said, conversations that must continue.
Cool.
We want to thank you for being here this morning, and looking forward to having this conversation again, rather a continuation of the same, in terms of what we can do to lift education out of its crisis. Folks, thanks for being here on Kenya's Biggest Conversation this morning.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.